everybody, I'm Zenith Rule, and welcome back to the Disney Debate, where Kat Macberrie, Doug Macberrie, and I discuss Disney films, Disney TV shows, and anything in between. Because today we are discussing 101 Dalmatians, the television series, to conclude our 101 Dalmatians marathon. And before we begin, though, we are 2 episodes away from our 75th episode. We've been doing this for 73 episodes, guys. Wow. We've been doing this for 6 years now, and dear God, it gets crazier and crazier every single time. Because just when I think I've seen it all, just when I think that, I cannot be any more bored out of my mind, or cannot be any weirder, or cannot be any more odd or enjoyable, something surprises me. Something surprises me, comes out of nowhere, and you know what? We have a couple things, both good and bad, that surprised me today, because, dear God, I was not expecting some of the things that happened in this TV show. And we're gonna discuss we're gonna discuss 5 of the episodes. We saw the first 4 episodes together, and we also saw the Christmas episode. And so we got a good feel of the show with those first 4 episodes. And with the Christmas episode, we watched it because we'd heard things. We had heard things about it, and things happened. But before we get into all of this, and we discuss, the crazy things that happened, that even someone outshone 102 Dalmatians in some instances. Before we get into that, how's it going, Kat?
Memo to myself: check brain at door when watching this TV series. Now I'm seeing spots. Spots.
And Mr. Doug, how's it going?
I think I'm also seeing spots. I should get a spot remover.
So yeah, we saw the 101 Dalmatians television show today, and this is something that I had heard of before. I remember maybe catching 1 or 2 episodes because the structure of it, the look of it, sounds familiar. I mean, I don't think it's something I watched regularly because I never remembered any of the content of the episodes, but it definitely looked familiar, and I might have been flipping through it when I was watching stuff like Darkwing Duck or Timon and Pumbaa, those shows that you watched as a kid. Granted, I can't remember any episodes of Timon and Pumbaa to save my life. So, I mean, it's that type of thing where I guess I watched it when I was a kid, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. And that's kind of the thing with this. I just watched it when I was so young that I couldn't remember it, so I didn't really know what I was in for. And it's very, very different from anything we've talked about up until this point. 101 Dalmatians, the original, was a good film. It wasn't perfect, but it was a nice, enjoyable film. Patch's London Adventure was an improvement in many ways, and was actually a deep character study. 101 Dalmatians, the live action, was kind of a reboot, a live action remake of the series, and while it did fix a lot of the problems, it also had a weird second act. But for the most part, it was enjoyable. And like we said with 102 Dalmatians, it was not really worth your time. It was bad, and I know some the fans on Twitter have stated that, they enjoy it for how bad it is. And to a certain extent, I can kind of agree. I wouldn't go all the way with it, but I can see what you're saying. Some people have said that they like the cake scene. I don't know why. But that, you do you. But
I can kind of get it. Like, I guess that's why I don't hate it as much as other people do, or as much as I probably should. I still don't like the cake scene, but I don't, like I said, I don't hate that film as much as I do. And I guess because it's just, like, so blatant in its goofiness, it's just hard to hate it. Maybe
Yeah.
that's it.
I mean, I think that's it, because, like, I wasn't 100% like hating the film. I know it came off. I said that it was bad in the review, and I'm not taking any of what I said back. But my tone in that review was not the same as in, say, Maleficent, where I hate Maleficent. I really do. With 102 Dalmatians, I don't think it's worth your time, but I'm not, like, despising it, if that makes sense. Like, there are levels to my hatred, and that didn't get very high up there. This show is kind of weird because it fits in, like, all four of these criteria at the same time.
At the same time.
Like, in some instances, it improves on the original. In some instances, it's just an okay cliche kind of story, nice animation. In some cases, it's really fun, and it does a lot of things that are engaging. In some cases, it's a step back. In some cases, it's really, really dark and unnecessarily dark. In some cases, it jumps the rails completely. And if you think that being baked into a cake was the weirdest thing that happened to Cruella, no. We'll get to that. Because after seeing the Christmas episode, I think that takes the cake.
Where do we even start with, like, this TV show? I guess we should start at the beginning with the pilot. Let's make this very clear. This show is pretty much its own continuity. Because, like, there are some things that are carried over from the original movie as well as from the live-action movie, but it's kind of made into its, like, own sort of AU. Because, first off, they no longer live in England, they live in America. You could tell because they all have American accents, and apparently live next to what is prototype New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, while the events of 101 Dalmatians happened, hence why the family has all those puppies, at the same time, Cruella, not only is she not in jail, but she still runs her fashion industry, and Anita still works for her.
It's weird.
Yeah, and we got, like, new puppies and old puppies, and they now live on this farm right next to where the Colonel and Sergeant Tibbs and the Captain live, and they now have a chicken for a friend who wants to be a dog, and the puppies are enrolled in boot camp. There is a lot of shit going on, and they don't explain a lot of it. And the adventures they go on, like, just read the descriptions of some of these episodes and tell me they make sense.
It's, like, I think the best way to describe it is if you take Recess, but make it for very young kids. So it's Recess, but with dogs, and dogs going on adventures, and, like, you pretty much have the same voice cast that you do in a lot of, like, the Disney afternoon specials, but you also have, like, Bobby Hill and Phil and Lil, and like, the casting is very different, because on the one hand, I'm like, they do a great job, because, like, this is some of the talented voice actors that you know and love, but it's weird seeing them in these roles. And honestly, I'm not sure how well the voices fit puppies, because they definitely sound more like they're the age of the Recess cast, and not like, they're making it younger, because puppies, you want to say maybe a year old, and dog years, maybe that's what, like 5 or 7 or something. Like, these are young puppies, so they do sound a little bit older than they should, But I mean, I don't think that's personally a problem because I think the voice cast is enjoyable. But like, that's another thing that's kind of off because if you've been watching the Disney afternoon specials like Timon and Pumbaa, like this feels very similar. Like you have voice cast of Recess and other '90s shows with the structure of Timon and Pumbaa, the TV show, dumbed down for kids. But in some instances, it's not dumbed down. It's very weird. Doug, why don't you give a little bit of your thoughts overall before we dive into like the pilot and some of the individual episodes and talk about like our feelings on the show as a whole?
So yeah, I did grow up with this show, and yeah, it was part of my favorite block, and the block being the one that I also took a moniker from, One Saturday Morning. So yeah, I have a very close relationship with this. My thoughts on this are very mixed. They were mixed even when I was a kid, because it's like, again, it was one of those things where it was, my kind of dislike for the live action movie kind of played into it too. But yeah, there is also a lot of confusion, I think, in terms of, I think it's one of those things where it probably aired out of production order, and hence why, some things don't really make a lot of sense when you see them at the first. Um, I do remember also, and seeing this now, it's funny because yeah, you do have a lot of the like the regular standard fare voice actors, and then you also have like a lot of old sitcom actors. Like you have Charlotte Rae playing Nanny, you have David Lander playing Horace. Feel like there were other people in there too, but it's like those are the ones that are
Michael
like
McKean
prominent.
is Jasper.
Yeah, Michael McKean's in it.
April Winchell as Cruella.
April Winchell, who was
Pamela
also Miss Finster on Recess. So,
Pamela Adlon is Lucky. It's my purse. I don't know you.
I feel also very it's weird kind of the way they chose their main cast, because it's like we have Lucky, Rolly, and then we have Cadpig, who apparently was in the books, but it's like probably maybe she was in like the movies, but they never really addressed her, and yet it's like other puppies that were better known, like Freckles or Patch or Dipstick or Two-Tone. It's like all of them basically kind of get relegated to side characters who kind of don't even resemble anything as to what they were in their respective movies. But yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts on it right now.
Yeah, we have this really star-studded cast, and we've been saying this a lot for 101 Dalmatians, but Disney seems to go all out when they pick the cast for these things. There's one character who I couldn't quite place who it was. At first I thought it was Roger from Doug, but looking back, it could have been like it could have been Torvald from Hey Arnold, or one of those characters that had one of those. It was a basic bully character, so I think it was like Torvald.
Oh, I think we were
Hey
talking
Arnold.
about Mooch, who was played by Danny Cooksey, and that name should be familiar to anybody who grew up with Nickelodeon because he was Bobby Budnick on Salute Your Shorts. He also played Hot Streak on Static Shock. And also, it's funny that you mentioned Doug, too, because this was actually done by the same production company that did Doug, Jumbo Pictures.
Mm-hmm. So it's like these are all familiar voice actors, and I kind of fit right back into the show. Like I think it was a great transition from like the TV show to here, because it's like these are people that I recognize, I know, and I like them in the roles. Let's discuss the characters briefly before we talk about the episodes. So we have Cadpig, who is this hippie puppy, which is the weirdest thing ever, because she's just like, oh, it looks like you have such anxiety. She uses huge terminology and stuff that I don't think kids would really get. Like, she talks about auras and stuff like that, and I'm like, what kid's gonna understand this? But at the same time, it's kind of funny. Then you have Lucky, who is kind of the rascal of the group. He gets into trouble. He's the leader. He is the one who's usually more arrogant. Think T.J. Detweiler. Like, I got a very big T.J. Detweiler feel from him, only younger and more, a little bit more obnoxious. And then you have Spot, who we didn't really learn too much about. It's just a bird who thinks he's a dog. So they took the Eric Idle bird from 102 Dalmatians. And then we have Rolly, whose entire shtick is that he's hungry all the time. And honestly, I could have done without Rolly again. Kat, what do you think about this main cast of characters?
At least I can say that they actually have characters for the most part. Because, at least you can, look at each one and tell what their divine personality traits are. That being said, I didn't, they were, none of them, really endeared to me too much. It's like, oh, they're your typical archetypes you can find in any Disney show. And, it's harmless. I still don't like Rolly. I still don't like how his whole shtick is that he's the fat kid. Because, like I said, I really hate that archetype. Because it's not a personality trait. If anything, it's a mental disorder. And then and the fact that they play it up for laughs, too, is just really annoying. So, that's my whole feeling about that. But the others, they were fine enough. Although, I'm still confused by the character of Spot. Because I know she's a chicken that's, wants to be a dog, but they never explain why. And at first I thought it was going to be with the parrot from 102 Dalmatians, in that she was delusional and believed herself to be a dog, but this isn't the case. If anything, she's the most logical one out of the bunch and is always trying to talk sense, but I'm like, wait, if you're the smart one here, then why do you want to be a dog? Like, why do you keep training yourself to be a dog? That makes no sense. And they don't have any motives she never says any motives on why she wants to do this. And granted, the others don't try to talk her out of it. They're surprisingly accepting of this, but it's just confusing because I don't get it.
There's even an episode where they're confronted by a bunch of ostriches, and she says, I got this. I'm a bird. This is my territory. And it leads to one of the funnier gags where she's like, we come in peace, and the ostriches are like, destroy the invaders, which, admittedly is funny, but that proves that she is a bird, and she knows she's a bird, but what, maybe we just haven't seen enough episodes to understand why she's like that, but I think that's kind of a failure on the airing part. If they ever do explain it, they should have brought it up in the first couple of episodes, because we get the pilot, which does set everything up, but then we learn nothing about the new characters. So if they do set it up later, then we're completely missing that.
Yeah, and then Spot aside, there's also this other character, this Lieutenant Pug or whatever, and apparently he works for the Colonel, and they are putting all the dogs and all the puppies and everyone through boot camp. And I'm like, wait, why are they doing this now? Did their parents do this? Is this something that was a requirement for them to live on the farm? Is this something that the Colonel thought would be helpful to them? Again, there's no explanation given. It's just something they have to do. And suddenly we get this little obnoxious little dog that's yelling at them constantly to shape up and everything, or he'll demote them, and I'm like, okay, who are you and why should I care? And they start off his introductory episode by, having him face a legit fear of his. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know your character enough to, appreciate the gravity of this situation. So what? None of this makes sense.
Yeah, we don't... The episode that we meet him, it opens up with him being scared about a gigantic cat.
Yeah, and again, that makes no sense either. Like, I know pugs are small, but they're not that small in comparison to cats. It's like, ugh. Again, trying to leave my brain at the door here, because this is definitely one of those shows where you have to accept that this is based on cartoon logic, and you can't you can't bring like common sense into this too much. But god damn it, it's so hard.
I kind of wish that these characters were introduced in a more normal fashion, because, like, obviously, if you're going to have a TV show, you need a full cast of characters. But there's a couple ways that you can do this. Either assume that the audience is familiar with these cast of characters, which they won't, because there's a whole bunch of new ones that weren't in the movies or anything else. So that's off the table. If not, you have to either introduce them right away or do so in such a manner that we care about them. And while they're interesting, to say the least, they're not really well defined outside of their personality trait, to the point where, like, we're never really officially introduced to them as characters. But instead, like, it's the little kid show logic, where we'll just have these characters, the kids will get to know them eventually. And to a certain extent, I can, I understand, I get, Sergeant Tibbs and the Colonel, I get those two, I get a lot of the people on the farm, but I don't understand this new, like, a lot of the new cast. I still think the funniest part was the ostriches bit, but, like, we really needed a better introduction to these characters. Doug, do you agree?
Definitely. I mean, that's basically what I said. It's, it'd be one thing. I know the pilot kind of had to have its own thing to do, and it kind of, like, gave us a glance at some of the characters, but it's like, yeah, it's like all of a sudden they just kind of show up out of the woodwork later on. It's like we don't really know anything about them. And yeah, they definitely could have done a better job of introducing the characters, or at least from the episodes that we saw. Definitely sometimes it always stinks when they air things out of production order and you are left really confused.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think we're gonna watch any more than we have of the show. Like, this is, don't get me wrong, this is a good show. I wouldn't call it great. But we saw 5 episodes of the show. Of those 5 episodes, most of them are 2-parters. Like, the 3 of the 5 episodes that we saw were 2-parters. So they're split into these 11-minute episodes, and you guys probably already know my opinion on 11-minute episodes already. I don't like those things being condensed so much, because you don't learn enough about these characters, and it ends up feeling padded most of the time. Adventure Time and Steven Universe can do it, and can do it right, but I feel like they should have made full episodes. But that's just me. I'm not a little kid. My attention span is very different. I get that. I'm not the target audience. But having watched these episodes, a lot of them are very standard affair. Obviously, the pilot is a 2-parter. It's setting up their move and everything over there. So, like, there's nothing really stand out about the pilot outside of they're moving into the farm. Cruella wants to buy the farm because, there's land there that she wants to use for stuff, and she tries to buy the farm from them, but, like...
Let's discuss that really, like, weird thing. Like, it... Like, again, this goes back to the fact that nothing in this show makes sense. So, yeah... Roger and Nita, they buy the farm, which just happens to be next to Cruella's mansion. And just as they show up to move in, she shows up and says that, she wants to buy their farm so she can extend her land, because I guess it's like part of her land or whatever. But she said that the old owners wouldn't sell it to her for some reason. So she is offering them, like, was it more than quadruple the amount that they paid in order to buy up the farm, and they refuse. But they don't give a good concrete reason as to why.
They
And
can find another farm.
I know, because, like, I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, buying up a farm, that costs a lot of money, and Cruella just gave you at least 4 times the amount that you paid. So why can't you just go and live somewhere else? Because now that they said no, she's going to be hounding them forever. And, yeah, and I realize what I said, too. But, yeah, the point is, like, there would be no plot to this show had they just taken her check and moved elsewhere. Because, yeah, that is like the whole plot, is that Cruella keeps trying to come up with these harebrained schemes in order to get them to either sell her the house or to kick them out of the house or do whatever she can to get her hand on that land. And they don't exactly make it clear as to what is so valuable about the land other than it's being inhabited by people that she, I guess, doesn't like. Or, you know, she just wants it because... yeah.
I mean, if Anita still works for her, like, she kind of likes them. The fact that she, like, just barges in on the farm all the time is weird enough. Because, like, there's a joke in the first episode that's really dark, where she mentions the fact that she tried to off the puppies. It's like, oh, I didn't manage to off one or two of them? Okay. Like, she casually says this as she goes onto the farm and asks to buy it and all this stuff, and I'm like... There's a very weird tonal shift in this.
Oh no, I don't think she actually offed them, but she came in really fast, and she assumed that she had actually killed them off. Like, she asked, there are still 101 of them, right? Or did I kill one of them or something?
Yeah, but it's still a dark joke. And so, like, this entire pilot is weird because, you know, Cruella de Vil hires Jasper and Horace, who she's now just meeting for the first time, to help her kidnap some of the puppies that have wandered back to the original place, and it doesn't end up working by the end. But here's another thing. Like, you would think the TV show would be all about Cruella trying to get back the farm. That was only the plot of 2 of the episodes that we watched.
Yeah, but from what I saw in the description of other episodes, she does make multiple attempts to run them off the farm.
Yeah.
So it's not the, like, plot of every single episode. Like, they obviously have, like, things going on with, like, the puppies themselves that don't include Cruella.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a consistent thing throughout the whole show.
And they do interact with her a lot. Like, the aforementioned ostrich encounter was an episode where she wasn't plotting anything, but they had to wander through her yard to get to somewhere, and there was hijinks. A lot of the episodes seem to follow, like, a cliche moral format. Like, there's a lesson that they need to learn, and it's a pretty obvious lesson, but it's for young kids, so I can let that go. I think much more than the case of Adventures in Wonderland, because here's the difference. These characters realize the lesson so much easier than the characters of Adventures in Wonderland. And granted, the episodes are shorter, so they can realize them faster, but these characters seem to me much more intelligent about it, and it doesn't talk down to kids. If that's one thing I will say about this, is that the morals don't talk down to kids. They're extremely obvious morals that you can pick out, but for young kids, I think this is fine.
Yeah, I mean, it does its job as a kid's show. You know, you can't fault it for that. What you can fault it for, however, is the really dark route that it goes sometimes.
Oh, yeah. We've discussed the dark route before. But, you know, we got past the pilot. The pilot was a little bit dark in places, but we're like, okay. And then we had some lighthearted episodes, like one where they find an elephant and they try to hide it. And Cruella is trying to she has this weird contract on the farm saying you can only have 101 animals there, which
makes no sense.
Because they clearly have more, but okay. But they're like, okay, well, there's an elephant on your land, and she keeps trying to find the elephant, and like that was a funny episode in that regard. And so like for a while I thought it would just be lighthearted humor. Then we get to the alligator game show episode. Hold on. Let me back up. The alligator game show episode.
It's not an actual alligator game show, just to be clear. It's more of it's a game called Squeal of Fortune, which basically promotes animal cruelty as they're forced to go through this obstacle course for their lives. I'm sure that's not how it's supposed to be, but that's how it was portrayed. 'Cause yeah, like that's bad enough on its own. But yeah, the whole plot of the episode is that Lucky wants to get on the show because they're offering up a prize, which is an autographed bone by Thunderbolt. So he is like auditioning the others to be his partner on the show, but none of them quite, measure up to like his abilities. And when they all get mad at him for trying to act all high and mighty, he has no choice but to bring along the one creature that's willing to team up with him, which is Steven the alligator.
Who we only know from this episode. We haven't been introduced to him at all.
Yeah, and the shit he does in this episode, like, oh my god. So they get to the lot because when it comes to game shows, they usually have to interview people before they let them on, just to make sure they're up to scruff and everything. They get there, and it turns out that the pets can only enter the game show if their owner is there with them. Well, of course, Lucky realizes, oh crap, that means we're out, because my owner obviously isn't giving us permission to be here, and you don't have an owner. So what does the alligator do? He sneaks up on a pair of poodles that are waiting in line with their owner. He eats the poodles, and then him and Lucky sneak into their collars, and the woman, who of course has no depth perception or hearing, goes into the studio with the two, and then they sneak out and enter the show on their own. Yeah, Lucky just stood aside and watched as two dogs got devoured whole, and he did not have a problem with this. And then we continue with this mayhem. They enter the game show. They're getting through the original preliminary round in which they have to dodge cars. Again, referring back to the whole animal cruelty thing. And at one point, one of the other contestants who was entered by Cruella, this dog, she says some snide remark to the alligator. So the alligator goes over to her and bites her tail off and eats it with a slurp.
And then, at the end of the episode, he eats the game show host.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because Lucky was so determined to get this crappy autographed bone, one person is dead, two dogs are dead, and another dog has been dismembered.
This was very dark.
That is what happens in this. Yeah. For kids.
And, I mean, obviously the moral is that you shouldn't be rude to your friends, because eventually, like, the alligator's disqualified, and they bring in Rolly instead, who ends up winning, because there's a part where he has to eat through a Jell-O mold. But, like, this gets really dark. Doug, what are your thoughts on this alligator?
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much I can say that you haven't already said. It's pretty dark. It seems like he's got his own, agenda ultimately. We don't know if he'll follow through with it because he gets disqualified, but obviously he comes out a winner in his own right, and yeah, in the darkest possible way. And it's like, yeah, we're gonna kill off other animals and a human being and play it for laughs. So yeah, kind of dark there.
For kids.
Yeah.
Because cannibalism was hilarious back in the day.
Yeah, like, it's just weird how dark these things turn. And, like, looking at it as a kid, you don't understand what's really going on. You're probably laughing at it. But there's a difference between something that's, that's that's dark humor and mean-spirited dark humor. Like, this definitely feels like it goes a little bit too far. It kind of really left unsettling feeling on me. Like, it's almost like some of those new SpongeBob episodes where they do something really weird, and I'm like, as an adult watching this, I'm like, really? This is what they're showing? It's fine having humor where people get hurt, but like just having an alligator eat everyone, that's a little bit dark. And then we have this dark like humor and stuff juxtaposed with the next big episode, which is the Christmas episode. Now,
well, before we get into that, can I mention that other not so dark but still disturbing episode?
Oh, sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, there's this other episode. It's not so much dark, but it's disturbing, at least to me it is. And it's an episode where Lucky goes to the dance with another Dalmatian that he falls in love with, a Dalmatian named Two-Tone. And if that name sounds familiar to you, that's because it is. Because Two-Tone was the name of one of the puppies in the live-action 101 Dalmatians, a.k.a. Lucky's sister. Essentially, he falls in love with his sister and asks her out. And, like, I'm trying to figure out if this is supposed to be in continuity or not, because on the one hand, they dropped a familiar name. On the other hand, Two-Tone doesn't look the way she did in the movie. So, and I'm trying to decide, like, are all the 101 Dalmatians, like, you know, related genetically? I mean, I know a lot of them are technically step-siblings, but even if that's, like, the more preferable scenario, he still asked out his stepsister. It's like, I'm sorry, like, I can't get over that. When I saw that when I realized that was the plot of the episode, I'm like, ew, 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 ew. And it's like, I know that dogs do that. I know a lot of animals do that. They end up interbreeding with, like, their siblings and their parents or whatever, but I'm surprised they actually showed that on a kid's show. Because suddenly I was quoting the scene from Joe Dirt again. It's like, he's your sister, man, and you made out with her. What's wrong with you, man? I didn't know she was my sister at the time. She's just so hot. You just said your sister's hot. What a freak. You're going to hell, man. It's like, ugh. It's like, ew. I get the skeebies just thinking about it.
It could be worse. It could be better. Like, I didn't personally find this as weird because they're dogs, simply because, you know, like, they're animals. I mean, granted, yes, this is a kid show, and showing something like that in a kid show is kind of weird, but I doubt kids would pick up on the fact that they're siblings. They don't outright say it. So, I mean, maybe that's still, just me. I don't know.
But they could have easily made it like a different dog. They didn't have to make it another Dalmatian. They could have made up a name for her, like, you know, because I mean, heck, they made up the character and the name for Cad Pig, technically speaking. So I don't understand why they used a familiar name and a familiar character who has an established bloodline as his love interest. It just makes no sense. It's gross, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as weirded out by you, but I get it. I do get it. It's, you know, it's something that probably shouldn't be in a kid show. Yeah, like, the tone is all over the place. In terms of the stuff that we watched, half of it is really upbeat and wacky and teaching all these morals, and then the other half is dark humor and all of this other stuff. And then we get to the Christmas episode. Now, this is something that we specifically went further on in the timeline to watch, because I think this is like episode 23 or whatever, because
well, it's 11. It's not that far down, but it's like toward the end of the first season.
Yeah, it's one of the later episodes, and we specifically sought this out because was it you or Doug who like?
I insisted on it just because I wanted to see A, how this show handled their version of A Christmas Carol, and B, I was curious to see what Cruella's past was, because that's one of the things that we never learn about in any of the movies is, the story behind Cruella, what her upbringing was like, what her family was like, and how she became the way she is. And given that we're soon going to be getting a live-action movie version of Cruella, I kind of wanted to compare and contrast just for shits and giggles to see how this would play out. And this episode did not disappoint.
Okay, so here's the thing. They do Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol with Cruella de Vil. And it's the weirdest thing, because the thing is, this has to be set in an alternate universe, because just for this episode, she changes. She goes through the entire Christmas Carol. She sees the ghost of Christmas. She sees Jacob Marley, Ghost of Christmas Past, Present, and Future, and she changes her ways. It's pretty much straight up Christmas Carol, like most shows do. And, they have the puppies as the characters who are the ghosts, which is the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that too, because honestly, I don't really understand why they went with Cruella for this. I know why, because she's the villain, obviously, but the fact that they expected her to have this big transformation and have it make sense did not make sense.
Yeah, because she's always evil. She's always going to be evil. I mean, this is only season 1 of the show. There's more episodes afterward where she's not going to change. And we know Cruella. She works as a villain, like Disney's House of Villains. She's a villain. But so they have Cad Pig as the Ghost of Christmas Past, which is the funniest thing is what, I can't be a dog and a Ghost of Christmas Past at the same time. I have hobbies, I'm these things are not mutually exclusive. It's not that's like saying I can also be 25 and 12 at the same time. These are things that aren't usually done. It simply isn't done.
I just like how, because I assume in the show it's the same as any other universe where the dogs and animals can all talk to each other, but they can't talk to humans. And I'm just surprised that she was more shocked by the fact that it was a dog that was the spirit, not the fact that the dog could talk.
It's so weird because the main dogs are the ghosts, and obviously they have Rolly as the Ghost of Christmas Present, the one who eats all the time, and I'm I guess that the casting fits, but it's still weird that the dog is talking to the humans because this never happens in the show. They can't understand each other, and she's not freaking out. But we learn about her past. We do learn about her past and how when she was a kid for Christmas, she wanted a puppy. Instead, she was given a designer cardigan or sweater or something that she didn't want. And it's a very weird side of Cruella to see that she used to like puppies and used to like a lot of things, but her parents were never around. She was given stuff by her servants, but her parents were never around, and that kind of changed her in a lot of ways.
I wouldn't say changed her. It more it exacerbated an already evil person. Cause granted, her backstory is sad because she comes from that typical household. She grew up rich, but her parents were never around, and the one thing she always wanted, she never got, and always got the opposite of that. But at the same time, you can still see that inherent Cruella evil peeking through, because once she realizes she didn't get what she wanted, she takes out her evil aggression on her caretaker. You see her first nanny, she has her deported in a box.
Yeah, you see the thing about the dark humor in this show? It's weird. But
Yeah, then you see her as a kid, and once again, she doesn't get that puppy. So what does she do? She goes on a rampage and starts and tries to run down these kids and their puppies instead. All while a different caretaker watches over her, and then ends up disappearing in the next flashback.
it's ridiculously crazy. But the cake topper, the thing that tops her being baked into a cake. Okay, so after all of this, after she learns about her past, present, and future, and blah, 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 she says, I will change, and, I need to give gifts for everyone. And so Jasper and Horace are like, but everything's closed, it's Christmas Eve. And she's just like, I'm gonna have to improvise. And she's at the top of her office, and she says, office supplies for everyone. Here, you get a copier. And she throws her copier out the window onto ice skaters. She goes to Anita, and she's just like, and she dumps a whole thing of office supplies, you get a stapler and you get some tape. Office supplies for everyone. She's the Ellen DeGeneres of office supplies in this. And then she gives Anita a name tag that says Susan, and she's just like, oh, I grabbed the wrong name tag. Well, I'm firing Susan on Monday anyway. I'm like, office supplies for everyone. This is the weirdest, most funny thing. And yes, it's dark, but it's the right kind of dark. You can do things oh, I'm going to fire Susan on Monday, because it's not directly physically harming her. And yeah, it's it is dark, but it's not deporting someone in a box. You don't know if she's alive. But
actually, they even show her trying to kill one of her nannies, when she's older. The last time that she actually gets presents, she gets a mechanical puppy. She throws it into the fire. You watch it melt, and then she looks at her nanny like she's gonna throw her in too. Yeah, I'm okay, there's the Cruella we know.
Yeah, this show gets dark, but it's just that ending to the Christmas episode made it for me. Just throwing the copier out the window. You don't see it coming. There's no build up to it. It's just I'm gonna improvise. Office supplies for everyone. Here, you have a copier. Poof.
My favorite line is when she goes up to someone from the Salvation Army and gives them a huge wad of cash and is like, Merry Christmas. This is tax deductible, right? I'm like, that's perfect. I want to do that next time I go up to one of these people.
It's yes. They really understand that she's not changing that much in this episode, but she wants to change. And obviously it doesn't stick. But, this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to Cruella de Vil. And dear God, I love it. I love, this has to be in the title card. Office supplies for everyone. Just have a copier falling on someone.
Oh god. I am glad that they, I was kind of bummed out that they went the traditional route and had her, weeping at the tombstone, being like, oh no, that my future is that I die. Oh, that I now have to change for the better. It's no, they changed it slightly so that not only did she die, but she was apparently so poor that she ended up getting buried in a pet cemetery, and that's what made her change. And even then, she doesn't fully change. She's still Cruella. She just tries to be nice in her own Cruella way, which is not really nice at all.
It's so weird. I was also expecting them to do a Pet Cemetery joke where one of the animals pops out of the grave, but it didn't happen. But anyway,
I think it would have been too morbid even for this show.
But Doug, I apologize. I've been stealing some of your spotlight. So why don't you talk about this episode? Because
man, give me my spotlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like for the most part it's a standard Christmas Carol. Definitely, I laughed at the whole office supplies stuff, but there were some very odd choices. I felt for instance, they decided to make Lucky into Tiny Tim. Is so apparently.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah. And then in as the Ghost of Christmas Future, they have Spot in there, and basically it's she is making light of things because it's so dark that she's got to make things, comic relief, etc. It's like, the comedy kind of falls flat.
I almost expected them to like make a dark joke about that, like, why did the chicken cross the road? To die.
But yeah.
Because that would have made a little more sense, but no, they kind of play her role up for laughs, and yeah, that did take away a lot from it.
Yeah, and I also kind of, I know it's kind of more the alternate timeline thing, but the whole thing is that Cruella fires Anita because she won't stay and work on Christmas, and it's like apparently the whole thing gets her so upset that it's like, on Christmas basically they can't afford anything even though they've already bought the gifts. So it's like they open up all their gifts and say, "Oh, this is what you were going to get, but now we have to take it all back." And it's like, and then it's like one of the gifts I think is like something she could take with her to work. It's like, "Oh, I could take this to that job that I don't have." It's like the way that she speaks is almost like, what, you're not going to get another job? You got this. Oh yeah, it was a portfolio. So it's like, yeah, you got this great portfolio anyway. So it's like, why does it matter if Cruella fired you? You could find somewhere better to work for. You should have done that from the start.
Plus, what is like Anita the sole breadwinner of the household? Like, I thought Roger was getting all that money for his songs and everything. Because how else could they afford the farm otherwise?
Well, he decided to stop writing songs because we don't have any in the show so far. So.
Yeah, we have like the opening, which is really not that memorable, and that's about it.
Yeah, the opening is very 90s. It doesn't fit with 101 Dalmatians. Like, you could put it on any TV show. It's, honestly, it's the least catchy of Disney's opening theme songs. They're usually very good about, like, opening themes for TV shows, especially back then. But it's no DuckTales. It's no Darkwing Duck. Like, dear God.
It's no Recess, no Pepper Ann.
Yeah, like, they did such a good job. But yeah, so to me, the crowning capstone is this Christmas episode, because it pretty much encapsulates, like, all of what this show is. Like, there are parts that are just okay. There are parts that are really out there and really memorable and enjoyable. There are parts that are really dark. And there are parts that do a good job of improving the characters from the original, like, movies. So it's like this TV show is basically taking hints from every single version of 101 Dalmatians up until this point. But it's an odd mismatch. It does not know what it wants to be. It doesn't know what tone it wants to set for itself. It doesn't know if it just wants to go with one continuity or the other. And to be honest, my biggest problem, aside from the dark humor, which, some people might like, some people might not, the biggest problem is that it's all over the place with its continuity and its tone. It really needed either another pass through the editing room, or it needed to really define what it was. But like, my major issue that sets this apart from, like, it's good. It could have been so much more. But it's these things that really hold it back from being a show that I could just turn on and watch. Like, I enjoyed the episodes that we did watch, but a lot of it I was kind of checking out through, and I know Kat was doing the same.
Yeah, like, honestly, the more generic episodes with them either learning a lesson or going on an adventure that's gonna turn out as you predict, it's, it's the equivalent of, of a parent sitting down with their kid and just trying to, like, spend time with them while not really paying attention to, like, what's going on. Like, that's pretty much what this is. Like, I would not really recommend this for, like, a casual viewer. Like, maybe if you're curious, like, I would at least recommend the Christmas episode just because it's so damn entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as a whole, it's honestly not worth watching. Like, I looked at the descriptions, and like I said, there are some weird descriptions of the episodes, but other than, like, one or two, which I think, like, dive into Corella's, like, past and her life a little bit more and gives her like a little more depth. There's really nothing else I saw that was of intrigue. Like I saw like there's like a big like 3-parter that ends the series where it's revealed that apparently Nita and Roger aren't legally married. I guess like this whole time they haven't been legally married because their priest was a con man. Like I would be interested to see how that turns out, but in regards to that, that's the only thing that kept my interest. Everything else, I'm like, yeah, this looks like about another 11-minute snooze fest. So yeah, unless you have little kids, I would not recommend watching this series.
And what are your final thoughts, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, I have a kind of a history with it myself, having seen it back in the day. I do remember, like, aside from the stuff that we watched, I know, like, there was a whole thing about Horace having a crush on Nanny. Not quite sure how that, panned out ultimately, but, yeah, definitely, it's one of those very hit or miss, mostly miss sort of things. Especially it has not aged well. I mean, I'd say, if you're curious, check it out, but, do kind of what we did and only watch a handful of episodes just to get the idea and see if, it's really for you or not.
As for me, like I said, I still think there's problems. I won't be watching it anytime soon, but I will say this. It's better than... I will say this. I like it better than Adventures in Wonderland, and I think this stands the test of time better than that. I would show this to my kids more than I would Adventures in Wonderland, simply because they very clearly define these characters. They solve their own problems. They figure things out on their own. And, maybe Adventures in Wonderland was supposed to be shown to, like, toddlers or, like, little kids. And I could see that. But I've seen a lot of adults actually really like Adventures in Wonderland. So I could just be completely off. But honestly, I prefer this. I definitely prefer this. It has its share of problems, but office supplies for everyone. I mean, you get a stapler, and you get a copy machine, and you get a TV. Like, I honestly, like, that episode was the best thing ever, and I'm glad we ended it out on that high note. If you see anything, watch the Christmas episode, because, dear God, it is insane in a very good way. With all of that being said, I think that's, I mean, we got a lot more out of this than I thought we would. But, this has been the 101 Dalmatians television series. We watched 5 of the episodes to get a good idea, and I think we got a really good feel of what the show is like. And so we conclude the 101 Dalmatians marathon until Cruella comes out. This is our second major marathon that we have completed for now. And, I mean, I'm really enjoying this marathon format. I'm really enjoying seeing how everything goes from start to finish, because everything we've seen in the 101 Dalmatians franchise has had such a different feel, a different tone to it. And this is different from the Shaggy Dog, because these have all been made at very different points in time. And you can see that a show that was very much a product of its time, a movie that was very much a product of its time when it came out, was transformed and modernized and changed. It's very interesting to me to see. I'm intrigued to see what Cruella is going to provide. But for now, we have concluded the marathon. What do you guys think? Kat, what's your thoughts on this marathon overall?
I mean, I've pretty much been retreading old ground because, as I said, I did grow up with all of these movies, so, it was nice. It was a nice surprise, especially with Patch's London Adventure. Like, because when I first saw it, I didn't really care for it, and I didn't think much of it, but when I saw it again now, I'm like, yeah, this actually is a really good improvement to the first one, and a logical conclusion. And then I watched, like, the live action, I'm like, okay, this is not as good as I remember. And then I watched like the TV show, and I'm like, okay, my brain's gonna need a restart on this one. But I mean, but like I said, it's been a fun adventure. You know, going back, seeing like watching Dalmatians again, seeing things I didn't catch before, and you know, just appreciating it for like the good product it is. I mean, ultimately, it's there to just promote Dalmatians. Let's be honest. But I mean, I think the movies each did a decent job in their own right, despite how goofy some of them turned out. So I did have a lot of fun, and now I will forever see spots. Spots.
And Mr. Doug, what are your thoughts on this marathon?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously this was my first marathon, kind of my first series of debates, essentially, aside from the recess debate. So, I mean, obviously, I will look for any excuse I can to rewatch, the original 101 Dalmatians. I definitely kind of needed the excuse to rewatch Patch's London Adventure, and I'm really glad I did. Not so much glad to have rewatched the live action stuff, and very much kind of middle of the fence with 101 Dalmatians the series. But like I said, it's all tied to my childhood. I was very nostalgic for this. I'm really glad that we did this. I was glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, this was certainly a fun venture. Like, I enjoyed the Shaggy Dog Marathon, but, like, that kind of left a sour taste in my mouth after the remake, because the remake was the worst thing I've ever seen on this show. But this marathon was a little bit longer and showed us very different things. So I'm very happy with this marathon, and I'm looking forward to ones in the future, because the stuff coming up in the future, there's going to be even more films. Like, some of these things, I'm looking at the sequels, like, there's probably going to be 6 or 7 of some of the films later down the line, especially once we get to, like, some of the Winnie the Pooh stuff. But like, that's a story for another time. I just wanted to say that I've had a lot of fun doing this. Next up, we're going to be doing the Absent-Minded Professor, and the rest of the films in that franchise. It's going to be another marathon, so look forward to that as we near our 75th episode. And I am Zenith Rule.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Doug Macberrie, aka One Sat Morn.
And thank you guys so much for watching us. Thanks for listening to this massive marathon of Dalmatians, and we are looking forward to a lot more, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in the future. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Office supplies for everybody!
That's tax deductible, right?
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/Zenith Will Review.